The grand chamber buzzed with an uneasy energy, the kind that grips you before a storm breaks. Inside the House Judiciary Committee, history was about to be written, or perhaps shattered. The stakes had never been higher. The subject, ethics in higher education, a battleground where power, silence, and abuse collided in a toxic dance. And in the eye of this gathering storm stood Jasmine Crockett, young, fearless, and razor-sharp, ready to rip through layers of deception with a single question. Across the room, Jim Jordan, the committee chair, radiated control and confidence. But beneath that polished veneer lurked a man cornered by shadows from his past. He was the gatekeeper of power, the old guard determined to maintain the status quo at any cost. His grip on the proceedings was firm, but cracks had begun to appear in his armor. Cracks that Jasmine's relentless pursuit threatened to widen. As the gavel struck, signaling the start of the hearing, all eyes locked on the two figures. A battle of wills ignited before a nation watching with bated breath. The silence was thick, almost suffocating, broken only by Jasmine's sharp voice as she poised to ask the question that could change everything. The question that would ignite a chain reaction, unraveling decades of silence and complicity. In that moment, the line between justice and power blurred, and no one could predict who would emerge victorious. But one thing was certain. This was not just a hearing. It was a reckoning, and the world was watching. The clock struck 9 a.m. as the doors to the House Judiciary Committee chamber groaned open like the gates to a coliseum before battle. The room swelled with anticipation. Rows of reporters lined the back wall, cameras rolling, pens poised. Outside, a throng of protesters held signs that read, "Believe survivors and power protects power." Inside, the air was thick with a kind of silence that screamed, the calm before confrontation. At the center of the room, the horseshoe of lawmakers sat stone-faced, flanked by aides whispering feverishly behind laptops. At the head of it all sat Congressman Jim Jordan, his jaw clenched, gavel in hand, as if gripping it tightly could somehow hold the tide back. His eyes scanned the room, stopping for a second too long on one seat, the one belonging to Jasmine Crockett. She entered not like a guest, but like a force of reckoning, sharp heels clicking like a war drum, her black suit cutting through the air like a blade, afro proud and defiant. She didn't smile. Not today. She came not for theater, but for truth. The topic of the hearing was as combustible as gasoline: institutional ethics and the protection of victims in educational settings. But everyone in the room knew this wasn't just about policy, it was about him. It was about what he knew and what he did not do. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't about to let the man with the gavel hide behind its sound. As Jordan called the session to order, banging the gavel once, twice, the thud echoed like gunshots. "The committee will come to order," he said, his voice firm but betraying the faintest tremor. Crockett watched him with the focused stillness of a hawk. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Her fingers tapped once on the table, a signal not to the room but to herself. "You've fought harder fights than this. You've bled more for less." Jordan began his opening remarks, reading from a paper that might as well have been soaked in gasoline. "This hearing is about protecting students, our sons, daughters, athletes, scholars, from institutional failures," he said, eyes flicking up to glance at her, like a man checking to see if the storm cloud was moving. Crockett tilted her head, unimpressed. The hypocrisy rang in her ears like a fire alarm. "We must ensure universities have clear reporting channels and enforce accountability at every level," he added, the irony dripping so thick she could smell it from across the room. And then he made the mistake she was waiting for. "We've all taken our responsibility seriously, every one of us." Her lips curled, not into a smile, but something sharper, a warning. When her turn came, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room leaned in by instinct. "Mr. Chairman," she began, voice smooth as velvet but laced with razor wire, "I'd like to ask about the phrase 'every one of us.' When you say that, are you including yourself?" The silence was immediate. Not the silence of disinterest, but of disbelief, like the moment before a glass shatters. Jordan hesitated, his throat bobbing. "Congresswoman, This hearing is not about— No, sir, she interrupted, her voice rising half an octave, cutting through his like a scalpel. It is about that. It is about the choices made by powerful men when boys cry out for help and no one listens. It is about institutions that pretend to protect while they cover up in silence. The air turned electric. No one moved. Even the cameras seemed to stop zooming. He reached for control with his gavel again, banging it once. The Congresswoman will direct her questions. My questions, she snapped, are directed precisely where they belong. Her voice now rang out like a verdict. You were there, Mr. Jordan. You were in the room, on the sidelines, coaching those young men when they came forward, when they whispered things no teenager should have to whisper. And what did you do? Jordan's face turned a pale shade of fury. That's not the topic of this hearing. But she pressed on, heart pounding, words locked and loaded. You want to talk about ethics? Then let's talk about how ethics dies. Not with a scream, but with silence. With men like you who choose cowardice over confrontation. Tell me, sir, did you protect the students or did you protect the system that devoured them? Gasps rippled through the chamber. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. One of the aides stopped typing mid-sentence. Jordan's mouth opened, but no words came. Just heat rising behind his ears. He knew this was the moment. The dam had cracked, and she wasn't done. While you sat in this chair, she continued, hundreds of survivors relived their trauma in silence. You told the world you knew nothing, but the records suggest otherwise. The letters, the locker room complaints, the phone calls to your office. All of it, buried, ignored. And now here you sit, on high, talking about accountability. She turned slightly, letting the room see her side profile. Proud, unshaken. You want to preach about responsibility, Mr. Jordan? Then let me ask you, when will you finally practice it? There was no applause, only silence. A silence so deep it scraped at the nerves. Jordan gripped the gavel with white knuckles but did not raise it. For a second, it was as if the entire nation had leaned in through its screens, waiting for a response that would never come. In that silence, Crockett leaned forward, just enough, and said, I yield my time. For now. And with that, she leaned back in her seat, heart still racing, but jaw steady. She knew what she had just done. She hadn't come to ask questions. She'd come to make it impossible not to answer them. The hearing wasn't over, but the game had changed. The battlefield had shifted. The man with the gavel was no longer in control, and everyone knew it. It came wrapped in manila, no return address, no markings, just a single line of typed instruction. You'll know what to do. Jasmine Crockett held the envelope like it might catch fire. Her office had received it early that morning, slipped beneath the door before dawn. The air was still heavy with the residue of last night's fireworks in the committee chamber. But something about this package felt different, more dangerous. She peeled it open with surgical precision. Inside were photocopies, dozens of them, each stamped confidential, each marked with the unmistakable seal of Ohio State University. Her breath hitched as her eyes danced over the first page. Handwritten letters, dated, emotional, raw. And then came the name, James D. Jordan, assistant coach. Her hands tightened. These weren't just documents. These were witnesses, young men crying out for help, long before the nation knew the name Richard Strauss. And one letter bolded and underlined bore the line, I spoke to Coach Jordan. He said he'd handle it. It hit her like a freight train. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't hearsay. This was proof. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, flipping page after page, each one heavier than the last. Here was testimony that had been buried, locked behind closed doors, shielded by institutional loyalty. Here was a name, his name, scribbled in ink across the statements of pain. The injustice coiled in her stomach like acid. The world had let this man climb to power while survivors drowned in silence. And now, someone, somewhere, had handed her the match to light it all on fire. She didn't know who the whistleblower was. She didn't need to. The message was clear. Expose him. No one else will. Jasmine closed the folder slowly, the silence in her office suddenly louder than ever. She looked up at the framed portrait of John Lewis on her wall. Get in good trouble, she whispered. Copy that. The hearing resumed at 2 p.m. Sharp. Cameras reset. Jordan back at the helm. Gavel poised like a king trying to hold court in a kingdom built on rot. Jasmine entered late, on purpose. She walked straight to her seat without a word, placing the now redacted file in a plain blue folder beside her water glass. Her expression was unreadable, but behind her eyes fire danced. Jordan had no idea what was coming. As witnesses recited prepared testimonies, Jasmine barely blinked. She wasn't listening. She was waiting, watching, timing her strike. And when the moment came, when Jordan made yet another sanctimonious remark about zero tolerance, she moved. Her hand slid to the folder with the precision of a marksman. Her mic light blinked red. "Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice clear, deliberate, and lined with steel, "I believe the committee should review newly received evidence relevant to this discussion." Jordan looked up annoyed. "We're not accepting unsolicited exhibits, Congresswoman." She ignored him. "This," she said, holding up the folder like a legal sword, "is a collection of internal correspondence from Ohio State University. It includes multiple first-hand accounts from students who allege they were abused by Dr. Richard Strauss. More importantly," and now her eyes locked onto his, "it includes letters directed to you. You were named, specifically, multiple times." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Jordan's jaw flexed. "This is outrageous." "What's outrageous?" Jasmine cut in, standing now, voice rising like thunder, "is that this evidence was never submitted to a federal body. What's outrageous is that survivors screamed into the void, and the void was you." The room grew hostile. Tension crackled like exposed wires. Jordan slammed his gavel. "This is out of order. The gentlewoman will yield." But Jasmine didn't move. "You knew. You were told. And still, you did nothing." Her words, each one a nail driven into the coffin of his denials, hung heavy in the air. For years, these letters were hidden, and now they surface, mysteriously, because someone out there finally decided enough was enough. Jordan stood. "This is political theater, Congresswoman. A low partisan attack based on unverified garbage." He was shouting now, veins visible beneath his collar, desperation lacing every syllable. But Jasmine remained unmoved, a storm with no fear of thunder. "Then deny it under oath," she said, eyes blazing. "Right now. Deny that you received these letters. Deny you were ever told. Look the American people in the eye and tell them they're lying." Silence. Then chaos. Committee members talked over one another, aides scrambling to verify authenticity, reporters already halfway out the door to break the story. The chairman's control unraveled in real time, and Jasmine knew it. She had thrown a grenade into the chamber and no one could pretend it hadn't gone off. Jordan, cornered, refused to sit. "This entire hearing is a disgrace," he barked. "We don't even know if those documents are real." Jasmine leaned forward, calm as the eye of the hurricane. "Then why," she said slowly, "do you look like a man who's already read them?" The hearing room was a powder keg, and Jasmine Crockett lit the fuse with a single sentence. "Mr. Jordan, you knew, but you stayed silent. Why?" The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot, and for a heartbeat, the entire chamber froze. Jim Jordan blinked just once, as though the directness of the accusation had stunned even him. Then, like a man thrown into a corner, he struck back fast and hard. "That's a lie," he snapped, voice rising, chair creaking as he leaned forward. "A cheap partisan lie. I had no knowledge, and I won't sit here while you slander me on national television." But Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't lean back. Her voice was calm but cutting, each word laced with contempt. "Tell that to the victims. Tell that to the young men who wrote your name in ink while they begged for protection. Because someone is lying, Congressman. And it's not them." Jordan pounded the gavel, but it only echoed his unraveling grip on control. "I said this is out of order," he barked. "Yield the floor." "I will not yield," Jasmine shot back, standing tall, her presence electrifying. "You may be the chairman, but that gavel won't protect you from the truth." The room surged with tension, staffers exchanging wide-eyed glances, cameras capturing every micro-expression. "This isn't about politics," Jasmine continued, stepping closer to the mic, voice steady. It's about accountability and justice. Jordan cut in, voice hoarse and indignant. Justice? You're weaponizing pain for headlines. You think you're brave, Congresswoman? You're a fraud. You don't know what happened in those locker rooms. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. But you did, and you did nothing. The entire committee room exploded in noise. Lawmakers shouting over one another, aides scrambling to calm the chaos. A flurry of motion captured live by every major network. C-SPAN's feed crackled with overlapping voices, headlines already forming in the minds of viewers across the country. Jordan stood, abandoning his usual calculated posture, and jabbed a finger across the table. You don't know the pressure, the politics, what it meant to survive in that system. You weren't there. Jasmine raised her chin, unfazed. You're right. I wasn't there. But they were, and they trusted you. She slid a copy of one of the victim letters across the table, its ink barely faded, raw and heartbreaking. This one says you promised to look into it, and then nothing. So I'll ask again, for the record. Why did you stay silent? Jordan's face flushed red, a mixture of fury and fear seeping through the cracks of his practiced demeanor. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Not defense, not denial, just silence. Jasmine didn't let up. You built your career on screaming about justice and freedom and accountability. But the moment it required courage, you vanished. Jordan finally found his voice, but it came out more brittle than bold. You don't understand. There were protocols, chains of command. And you chose none of them, Jasmine interrupted. You chose cowardice. That broke whatever composure Jordan had left. You're not here for justice, he snapped. You're here for a headline, for a viral clip, for Twitter likes and activist points. Jasmine's jaw clenched, her tone now slicing through the noise. I'm here because someone has to be, because for decades this system buried victims while men like you climbed higher. She turned slightly toward the gallery, speaking now to the audience, to the nation beyond the walls. How many more? How many voices do we ignore before someone finally says enough? Jordan grabbed the gavel, slamming it 3 times. We are in recess, he barked, voice cracking under pressure. This hearing is suspended. Aide after aide rushed forward, some trying to mediate, others trying to usher Jordan out through the side door. But Jasmine stood rooted in place, still staring him down, her voice the final echo. You can suspend the hearing, you can storm off the dais, but the victims don't get recesses, and the truth doesn't go away just because you leave the room. The feed cut to a wide shot as chaos engulfed the chamber. Jordan disappeared behind a door, sweat on his brow, fury in his steps. Jasmine remained at the table, her hands steady, the folder still open before her, like an unburied secret. Reporters flooded the hall, phones lit like torches, the story already igniting across social media. But inside the room, the storm had passed, at least for now. All that remained was the echo of a question unanswered. In a country that had just seen a man of power tremble beneath the weight of truth, the corridors of Ohio State University decades ago were filled with the sounds of everyday life. Locker doors slamming, sneakers squeaking on polished floors. But beneath the surface lay a darker current few dared to acknowledge. It was the mid-1990s, and Jim Jordan, then a young assistant coach, moved through these halls with the authority of someone who belonged, yet blind to the cries hidden in whispers around him. Athletes, some no older than teenagers, whispered of abuse by Dr. Strauss, a man entrusted with their health and well-being, yet who had become a source of pain and fear. One athlete, desperate and trembling, handed Jordan a note detailing the abuse. Others wrote letters, desperate for help. Jordan saw these signs, heard the rumors, yet chose silence. This silence was not mere absence of word. It was a deliberate shield, protecting an institution's reputation over the safety of its students. His hesitation, his decision not to act, cast a long shadow, a betrayal of trust that would haunt many lives. In those moments, Jordan's inaction wasn't passive. It was a powerful act that allowed injustice to persist. Meanwhile, miles away and years later, Jasmine Crockett's story unfolds on a sharply different path. Born and raised in a marginalized community in Dallas, she faced a world that told her, again and again, that she did not belong. From a young age, she confronted systemic barriers, poverty, racial prejudice, and an education system stacked against her. Teachers overlooked her potential. Society dismissed her ambitions as unrealistic. Not your place, they said, seeking to cage her dreams. But Jasmine's spirit was forged in struggle. She spent nights studying by candlelight, driven by a burning desire to rise above her circumstances. She marched in protests, raised her voice where others were silent, refusing to be erased. Each challenge she faced only hardened her resolve to fight not just for herself, but for those whose voices had been silenced. Her journey from those tough streets to the halls of Congress was not a gift. It was a hard-earned victory over a system designed to keep people like her on the margins. Back at Ohio State, the past loops relentlessly. Behind closed doors, administrators exchanged guarded words, prioritizing the university's image over truth. Jordan's role in these meetings was critical. He heard the accusations, saw the evidence, but chose to protect the institution's power rather than the vulnerable students. His silence was a fortress, built brick by brick to suppress truth and maintain control. This was no accident or oversight. It was a conscious decision to uphold an old order where power was preserved by burying inconvenient realities. This betrayal echoes far beyond the walls of OSU. It is a symptom of a broader political system that often values reputation and power over justice and humanity. Jasmine's presence in Congress stands as a direct challenge to that system. Unlike Jordan, who became a guardian of entrenched privilege, Jasmine embodies a new era of accountability and justice. She is not simply asking questions in committee hearings. She is demanding a reckoning. Her voice is sharp, unwavering, cutting through the complacency that has long protected abusers and silenced victims. Where Jordan represents the weight of a compromised past, Jasmine is the force of change, pushing the nation to confront uncomfortable truths. Her very existence in this space is a rebuke to the silence that allowed abuses to fester. Their stories are entwined like two sides of a political and moral battleground. One man, the gatekeeper of an old and broken system; the other woman, the insurgent tearing down walls of secrecy. This is not just a personal confrontation. It is the collision of history and justice, silence and courage, complicity and resistance. As the hearing room holds its breath, the ghosts of the past rise, not as distant memories but as urgent calls for truth. The future demands accountability, and these two figures stand at its center, embodying the struggle between preserving power and pursuing justice. The flickering glow of Jasmine Crockett's laptop screen cast sharp shadows across her determined face as she leaned deep into the evidence that could shatter decades of silence. Behind the polished veneer of political power and institutional respectability, a darker truth waited to be unearthed. Jasmine had forged a fragile alliance with Mark Reynolds, a former OSU wrestling star whose body bore scars deeper than any visible wound. Mark's voice trembled the first time he recounted the horrors he endured under the shadow of Dr. Strauss. Horrors whispered behind closed doors, buried beneath layers of denial and fear. Once a pupil of Jim Jordan, Mark's testimony was a pivotal key to unlocking the secrets Jordan desperately wanted to keep hidden. Together, Jasmine and Mark became investigators in a high-stakes game, navigating a labyrinth of erased records, hushed conversations, and threats thinly veiled as warnings. Their search took them to dusty archives where documents lay forgotten, to anonymous phone calls from frightened witnesses, and to encrypted emails that whispered of complicity and cover-up. Each discovery was a thunderclap that shook the foundation of the narrative Jordan had meticulously constructed. Then came the breakthrough, an overlooked trove of internal emails exchanged between Jordan and OSU's top administrators, exchanged at the peak of the abuse allegations. The emails revealed a chilling pattern: calculated silences, strategic deflections, and coded language designed to protect the university's reputation at the expense of the victims. Jordan, the once untouchable gatekeeper, was now exposed in raw digital ink, his fingerprints unmistakably smeared across the tapestry of deceit. The weight of these revelations pressed heavily on Jasmine's shoulders. Every message uncovered, every witness who stepped forward, carved away another layer of the lies that had shielded predators for too long. Yet the battle was not without cost. Threatening phone calls punctuated late-night investigations. Anonymous warnings lurked in her inbox, signaling that powerful forces were desperate to maintain the status quo. But Jasmine's resolve hardened with each obstacle. She knew the stakes weren't just political, they were profoundly personal for the survivors whose voices had been crushed into silence. The scales of justice had long been tipped, but with Mark's courage and the trail of evidence, Jasmine was balancing the fight anew. Back in the sterile, high-ceiling committee room, Jordan's confidence began to fracture. Rumors of the leaked emails circulated quietly among staffers before exploding into the media. His carefully maintained image as a stalwart protector of values was crumbling under the weight of undeniable proof. Jordan found himself cornered, a predator trapped in the glare of spotlight he had once evaded. His defiant denials echoed hollowly as the mounting evidence left no room for ambiguity. The man who had steered hearings now scrambled to contain a scandal that threatened to engulf not only his career, but his legacy. Jasmine watched from the wings, a blend of fire and steely calm radiating from her. This was more than political theater. It was a reckoning long overdue. Every late night spent piecing together fragments, every call to a reluctant witness, had brought them to this pivotal moment. The fight was no longer abstract or distant. It was real, immediate, and relentless. Jordan's empire of silence was cracking, and Jasmine was poised to deliver the final blow. As the pressure mounted, the room buzzed with anticipation. The lines between truth and deception blurred in the faces of those gathered, the air thick with tension and unspoken fears. The truth, once buried, surged forward like a tidal wave, unstoppable and fierce. In this high-stakes drama, Jasmine was not just a challenger. She was the voice for the voiceless, the beacon piercing through the shadows cast by years of silence. The hunt for justice was on, and the countdown had begun. The storm hit Jasmine Crockett like a relentless tidal wave, sudden and unforgiving. Just as she prepared to expose Jim Jordan's deepest secrets, a carefully orchestrated attack aimed to tear her down instead. Overnight, a scandalous article exploded across social media and news outlets, dripping with misinformation about Jasmine's past, a twisted false narrative targeting her college years. The article painted a distorted picture, crafted with precision to undermine her credibility and silence her voice. Jordan's allies in Congress seized the moment, wielding the article as a weapon, demanding Jasmine be reprimanded for what they called improper conduct during the hearing. It was a calculated attempt to not only distract from the allegations against Jordan, but also to destroy Jasmine's reputation in the most public, humiliating way possible. Inside the marble halls of Capitol Hill, whispers grew louder, fingers pointed, and the pressure mounted. Committee members, some longtime allies of Jordan, openly questioned Jasmine's professionalism, painting her as reckless and disruptive. The air was thick with political gamesmanship, a ruthless dance of power designed to isolate her. Yet beneath the polished facades of these power brokers, Jasmine stood unyielding, her spine forged from years of fighting uphill battles against bias and injustice. She refused to be a pawn in their dirty game. Every smear was met with unwavering defiance, every whisper with a louder voice of truth. Outside the chambers, a groundswell of support surged. The media spotlight shifted in Jasmine's favor, with investigative journalists digging deeper into the manipulative tactics used to discredit her. Young voters, activists, and communities across the nation rallied behind her, their calls for justice echoing through town halls and social platforms. They saw in Jasmine not just a politician, but a symbol of resistance, a fierce advocate unafraid to challenge the establishment. This wave of solidarity empowered her, transforming what was meant to be a crushing blow into a rallying cry. The very attempts to silence her only amplified her message. In heated interviews and public appearances, Jasmine confronted the attacks head-on, her voice steady and resolute. "This is about more than me," she declared, eyes blazing with conviction. "It's about standing up for those who have been silenced, for the truth that too many want to bury." Her words struck chords far beyond the confines of Congress, reaching people who had long felt marginalized and voiceless. The political machinery that tried to break her only revealed its own decay, and Jasmine's strength became a beacon in the gathering storm. Inside the corridors of power, Jordan's tactics began to unravel. The calculated smear campaign exposed the desperation of a man cornered, willing to sacrifice integrity for survival. Even some of his closest allies started to question the strategy, fearing the backlash from voters who demanded accountability and transparency. The growing divide within the establishment added fuel to the fire, tipping the balance in Jasmine's favor. What started as a brutal counterattack now morphed into a testament to her resilience and the undeniable power of truth. The fight was far from over, but Jasmine had shifted the battlefield. No longer merely a target, she became the orchestrator of a narrative that challenged corruption and abuse of power head-on. The tension between the old guard and the new wave crackled in the air like electricity, each side pushing harder, but only one rising stronger. In the face of calculated lies and political treachery, Jasmine Crockett stood as a living proof that courage, integrity, and community support could topple even the most entrenched empires of silence. The war for justice had taken a sharp turn, and the stakes had never been higher. The foundation beneath Jim Jordan began to crack in ways no one could ignore. Whispers of doubt slithered through the ranks of the Republican Party, subtle at first but growing louder with each passing day. Key party members, once staunch defenders, now exchanged wary glances behind closed doors, their voices tinged with fear. The scandal, like a poison spreading unseen, threatened to engulf not only Jordan, but the entire party's fragile image. Paranoia seeped into Jordan's bones. No longer the confident tactician, he became a man shadowed by suspicion, trust eroding with every rumor. His closest allies were no longer safe. He started to suspect his most trusted assistant of betrayal, convinced that confidential information was leaking from within his inner circle. Meanwhile, the pressure on Jasmine Crockett tightened like a vice. Threatening messages, anonymous and venomous, landed in her inbox, each one a chilling reminder of the dangerous game she was playing. "Stop or suffer the consequences," one read, cold and unyielding. The threat was clear. Abandon the fight or risk losing everything she had worked so hard to build. For a moment, the weight of her choices pressed down on her spirit. The crossroads loomed: sacrifice her career to protect her safety, or push forward into the storm no matter the cost. But Jasmine's resolve, tempered by years of struggle against injustice, refused to waver. She understood the stakes were not only personal, but emblematic of a larger fight against systemic corruption. Every fiber of her being screamed to stand firm, to hold fast to the truth that others wanted buried. Back in the heart of power, the atmosphere grew increasingly toxic. Jordan's paranoia spiraled into erratic behavior. Meetings that once ran smoothly descended into tense interrogations and veiled threats. His assistant, once a loyal confidant, faced cold stares and clipped responses, unsure if they were trusted or marked. The halls echoed with silence where there had once been certainty, and every glance seemed to carry the weight of accusation. Jordan's grip on control was slipping, the veneer of power fracturing under the relentless pressure of exposure and doubt. It was a political nightmare, spiraling out of control. For Jasmine, the external threats collided with internal battles. The very system she challenged sought to silence her through fear and intimidation. Yet even as the shadows lengthened and threats multiplied, she drew strength from the unwavering support of those who believed in her cause. Her conviction became a beacon in the darkness, illuminating the path through a landscape littered with deception and danger. In the quiet moments, she steeled herself, knowing that to retreat now would mean surrendering to a web of lies far too toxic to allow to thrive. The storm was no longer just about accusations or political maneuvering. It was a fight for survival, trust, and the future of a nation watching in breathless suspense. Jordan, trapped in a prison of his own making, faced not just public scrutiny, but the crumbling loyalty within his ranks. Jasmine, under siege from unseen forces, balanced on a razor's edge, her courage tested as never before. The lines between ally and enemy blurred, the stakes skyrocketing with every heartbeat. This was more than a scandal. It was a battleground where truth clashed violently with power, and only the strongest would emerge unbroken. The room was charged with electric tension, the kind that crackles in the air just before a storm breaks. Cameras from every major network blinked their red lights, capturing every second of what had been billed as the final hearing, the moment that could unravel decades of silence and deceit. Journalists whispered feverishly behind rows of microphones, and the packed gallery held its breath, waiting for the truth to emerge. Jasmine Crockett sat poised at the forefront, her eyes sharp, her jaw clenched with a quiet determination that spoke volumes. This wasn't just another political skirmish. It was a reckoning, a long overdue moment where justice clawed its way into the harsh glare of the spotlight. Then the unexpected happened. The chamber doors creaked open, and in walked a man whose presence instantly shifted the room's atmosphere. Middle-aged, dressed plainly but with an undeniable air of gravity, he moved with the measured steps of someone carrying the weight of untold secrets. He was a former wrestler at Ohio State University, once under Jim Jordan's coaching, an insider from a world few dared to question. The murmurs grew louder as the man took the stand, his eyes scanning the room, meeting Jordan's with a steely resolve. "I spoke with Jim Jordan about Dr. Strauss back in 1994, he declared, his voice steady but carrying the thunder of buried truths. The simple sentence hit like a bombshell, a direct confrontation with the past that Jordan could no longer dodge. The room fell into a stunned silence, the kind that sinks deep into your bones. Jordan's face, once a mask of unyielding confidence, flickered with something darker. Unease, maybe even fear. The weight of the accusation, backed by the witness's unshakable conviction, hung in the air like a guillotine's blade ready to fall. The other committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some whispered behind cupped hands. Others exchanged looks of disbelief and embarrassment. This was no longer a he-said-she-said political fight. This was evidence, cold and undeniable, implicating a man who had long positioned himself as untouchable. The very foundations of power trembled as history collided with the present in a clash both brutal and inevitable. Jasmine's heart pounded fiercely, but her expression remained composed. She had walked through fire to bring this moment here, fighting through smears, threats, and endless obstacles designed to silence her. Yet now, standing at this crossroads, the truth was unfolding, raw and unforgiving. The man's testimony ripped open the veil of silence that had shielded years of abuse. It was a stark, piercing reminder of the systemic failures that allowed injustice to fester unchecked. The injustice Jasmine faced was monumental. She had been branded a troublemaker, a disruptor. But in this room, under the glare of countless eyes, she was the beacon of courage, demanding accountability in a world steeped in denial. The final hearing unfolded like a tightly wound thriller, each revelation tighter and more explosive than the last. The witness recounted conversations with Jordan, moments where warnings were dismissed or buried, lives irreparably damaged by the cost of silence. The intensity was palpable. The narrative was no longer abstract or distant. It was personal, raw, and damning. Jordan's attempts to deny or deflect began to crumble as the man's testimony laid a foundation impossible to ignore. Even the staunchest defenders looked on with growing doubt, the veneer of loyalty cracking under the relentless pressure of truth. It was a moment of reckoning that transcended politics. It was a seismic shift in the very definition of justice. When the hearing finally adjourned, the atmosphere was thick with a mixture of disbelief, shame, and an undeniable sense of victory for those who had fought tirelessly for the truth. Jordan sat rigidly, the weight of exposure pressing down on him like an iron cage. Outside, the media frenzy erupted, headlines screaming of a political titan brought to his knees. Yet Jasmine remained focused, knowing that this victory was only the beginning. The system was still flawed, the scars still fresh, but now the silence had been shattered. And in that shattered silence lay the first fragile seeds of justice, planted by a woman who refused to back down in the face of overwhelming power. The fallout was swift and merciless. The once untouchable Jim Jordan found himself cornered, squeezed by an unrelenting vice of bipartisan outrage. The political fortress he had built over decades began to crumble as members from both parties, wary of the mounting scandal, turned their backs on him. Calls for his resignation echoed louder each day, not just from the opposition, but from his own allies who feared the contagion of his disgrace would drag the entire party into ruin. The air in the Capitol was thick with tension and betrayal. Whispers in the halls hinted at the fall of a titan. Eventually, under unbearable pressure, and with the weight of undeniable evidence pressing down on him, Jordan had no choice but to step down as chairman of the Judiciary Committee. The symbol of power and influence was reduced to a figure of disgrace, his legacy forever stained by the shadow of complicity. But the consequences didn't stop there. As the dust settled, the wheels of justice began turning with a newfound urgency. A criminal investigation was launched, peeling back layers of concealment to expose not only Jordan's alleged cover-up but also his calculated efforts to obstruct justice. The probe delved into attempts to intimidate witnesses, tamper with evidence, and silence those brave enough to come forward. The stakes were higher than ever, and the courtroom battles ahead promised to be fierce and unforgiving. Each revelation was a blow to the corrupt machinery that had long protected the powerful, exposing a web of deceit and betrayal that shook the very foundations of political accountability. The system that once turned a blind eye was now under the harsh spotlight of scrutiny, and no one, not even a seasoned politician like Jordan, was above the law. Amid this turmoil, Jasmine Crockett emerged as a figure of unwavering strength and grace. Praised widely for her relentless pursuit of truth and justice, she became a beacon of hope for those who had long suffered in silence. Yet despite the growing spotlight and public acclaim, Jasmine remained humble, grounded by a deep sense of purpose rather than a thirst for fame. In a quiet moment away from the cameras and the frenzy, she spoke with measured conviction. "I'm not seeking the spotlight. I just want justice to stop being an empty word." Her words resonated far beyond the walls of Congress, capturing the hearts of ordinary people who had witnessed too many broken promises and silenced voices. Jasmine's battle was not just political, it was profoundly personal, a fight against a system that often favored power over principle. Her courage shattered illusions and sparked a movement, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, integrity could prevail. The political landscape had irrevocably shifted. Jordan's fall was more than a personal defeat. It was a seismic rupture in the status quo. It exposed the uncomfortable truth about how power could corrupt, how silence could be weaponized, and how the relentless pursuit of justice demanded more than courage. It demanded sacrifice. Jasmine's journey illuminated the harsh realities faced by those who dare to challenge entrenched interests, underscoring the cost of truth in a world built on deception. The air was heavy with a mix of vindication and sorrow as the country grappled with the enormity of what had been uncovered. But amidst the chaos, one thing was clear. A new chapter was beginning, one where the voices of the oppressed would no longer be drowned out by the machinery of power. In the aftermath, as legal battles loomed and political allegiances shifted like sand, Jasmine's quiet strength remained a steady flame in the storm. Her story was no longer just a headline, it was a testament to resilience, a clarion call for justice that demanded attention. And while the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, the world had witnessed something rare and powerful. A woman who refused to back down, who stood tall when the odds were stacked against her, and who reminded us all that justice, when fought for with unwavering resolve, could become more than just a word. The sun dipped low behind the Capitol's towering columns, casting long shadows that stretched across the marble steps where Jasmine Crockett stood. Her silhouette was sharp against the fading light, eyes fixed, jaw set, a woman forged in the fires of relentless battle and unyielding conviction. The weight of everything she had endured pulsed in the air around her. The threats, the betrayals, the countless nights she wrestled with doubt and danger. Yet in this quiet moment, her gaze pierced through the gathering dusk like a blade, clear, unwavering, filled with fierce determination. Washington's heart beat beneath her feet, a city of whispers and secrets, where power was both prize and poison. Jasmine was no stranger to its shadows, but she refused to be consumed by them. She was a storm on the horizon, and she knew this fight was far from over. Behind the closed doors of a dimly lit room, a different kind of storm was gathering. A small cadre of seasoned politicians huddled together, voices low but edged with venomous purpose. They mapped out their next moves like generals planning an ambush. How to dismantle Jasmine's rising influence, how to fracture her support before the upcoming election. Their words dripped with calculation, a stark reminder that the machinery of power never rests, never sleeps. They whispered about smear campaigns, covert alliances, and the manipulation of public opinion. For them, Jasmine was a threat, a fierce, unyielding challenger to their carefully guarded dominion. They did not see a woman fighting for justice. They saw an enemy to be crushed, a symbol to be silenced. The game was ruthless, the stakes deadly, and failure was not an option. In their cold, calculated world, truth was a weapon to wield or bury as convenience demanded. Outside, Jasmine remained unaware of the conspiracies unfolding in the shadows, her mind already racing ahead to the battles yet to come. She knew the path she had chosen was riddled with peril, that every victory invited new enemies, and every truth revealed was met with fierce resistance. But her resolve was ironclad. This was more than politics. It was a fight for the soul of the nation, a struggle to break the cycle of silence and impunity that had held so many captive for so long. The Capitol steps beneath her feet were both a stage and a battleground, a place where heroes were made and legends were broken. Jasmine's story was not an ending. It was a spark, a call to arms for all who dared to demand change. Her eyes shone with the knowledge that the fight for justice was endless, that the forces arrayed against her would never simply step aside. The final frame lingered on her figure, poised and defiant against the encroaching night. Then in stark white letters across the screen, the message cut through the silence with brutal clarity. Truth is only the beginning. Power never relinquishes its hold. It was a chilling reminder that the struggle was perpetual, a relentless game where victory was fleeting and the price of resistance was high. The camera pulled back, leaving viewers with the haunting image of a lone warrior, standing tall in a city where battles were waged not just with words but with wills, and where the fight for justice demanded every ounce of courage one could muster. Jasmine's journey was far from over. The shadows still whispered, the threats still loomed, but so did her unbreakable spirit. In the endless dance of politics, one truth remained. The war for power never ends, and neither does the fight for those brave enough to challenge it. From the lingering shadow of the Capitol steps to the stark reality behind closed doors, the story shifts now into the realm where ideals clash with the hard edges of human nature. Jasmine's journey, though centered on political battles and public drama, reveals a deeper, more universal struggle, one that challenges the very core of justice, truth, and the human spirit. It is here, beyond the headlines and scandals, that the true lessons emerge, exposing a world where power corrupts, silence wounds, and courage is both a weapon and a burden. The stakes are not just political, but profoundly personal, woven into the fabric of lives torn apart by betrayal and resilience. This is a tale not only of one woman's fight, but of humanity's eternal battle against the forces that seek to suppress truth and equality. In the crucible of this unfolding drama, Jasmine stands as a beacon for those who have been marginalized and silenced. Her story is not just a political thriller. It is a human saga about the cost of standing up in a world that often rewards complicity and punishes defiance. From the moment she chose to expose the dark underbelly of power, she stepped onto a path riddled with injustice and danger. Each threat she faced was not just an attack on her person, but an attempt to erase the voices of those who suffered in silence. The invisible chains of fear, coercion, and denial that bind so many became her battlefield. It is a relentless war fought not with guns, but with words, influence, and the courage to speak truth to power when the world prefers lies and silence. The injustice Jasmine confronted was not abstract or distant. It was visceral and immediate. The very system designed to protect the vulnerable had been weaponized to shield the guilty. The institutions that should have upheld accountability twisted themselves into barriers of secrecy and deception. She faced a network of power so entrenched that exposing it meant risking everything: her career, her safety, and her sanity. But Jasmine's resilience was born from a place deeper than ambition. It was fueled by the faces of those forgotten, the countless lives shattered by betrayal, and the unyielding conviction that justice is not a privilege for the powerful, but a right for all. Her struggle was a testament to the strength required to confront systemic oppression, to refuse silence even when the cost was high. Yet this story also reveals the cruel paradox of justice, how those who seek it become targets, their motives questioned, their integrity attacked. The smear campaigns and political machinations that Jasmine endured were not mere obstacles. They were deliberate assaults meant to fracture her spirit and discredit her cause. The battlefield was as much psychological as it was political, where every victory was met with new waves of resistance. It is a stark reminder that in the fight against entrenched power, truth alone is never enough. It demands unyielding perseverance, strategic alliances, and an ironclad will to endure the storm. Jasmine's journey is a powerful mirror reflecting the sacrifices required of anyone who dares to challenge the status quo, reminding us that justice is often a long, grueling fight against overwhelming odds. In this narrative, the human cost becomes painfully clear. The faces behind the headlines, those victims of abuse, the whistleblowers, the forgotten, are the real heroes, their courage amplified through Jasmine's voice. Their pain, silenced for so long, now roars through the halls of power, demanding acknowledgement and change. Yet their journey also exposes a profound truth about our society. Justice is fragile, easily undermined by fear, politics, and the hunger for control. Jasmine's struggle serves as a call to action, urging us to recognize the deep fissures within our institutions and to commit ourselves to dismantling the structures that perpetuate injustice. It is a reminder that the fight for justice is collective, requiring not just brave individuals, but a society willing to confront uncomfortable truths. At the heart of this story lies the complex dance between power and morality. Jasmine's unwavering stand against corruption illuminates the cost of integrity in a world where compromise is often currency. Her narrative challenges us to reconsider the true meaning of leadership and courage, especially when the stakes extend beyond political gain to the very soul of a nation. It is a story about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of systemic cruelty and the necessity of hope amidst despair. This is not merely a tale of downfall and redemption, but an ongoing struggle that demands vigilance, empathy, and relentless pursuit of truth. As readers, we are invited to witness more than a political scandal. We are drawn into a meditation on justice itself, its fragility, its power, and its indispensable role in society. The story compels us to question the systems we trust and to acknowledge the often invisible battles fought by those who dare to confront injustice. It reveals the intricate webs of complicity and resistance, reminding us that justice is never guaranteed, but earned through courage and sacrifice. Jasmine's fight, though specific in its context, resonates universally, echoing the timeless struggle for dignity and truth in the face of oppression. This story also subtly cautions that the pursuit of justice is fraught with complexity and danger. It does not offer simple answers or guaranteed victories. Instead, it portrays the messy, often painful reality of challenging entrenched power, where allies may falter, enemies may strike in shadows, and the price of truth can be unbearably high. Yet within this struggle lies a powerful affirmation of human resilience and the enduring hope for a more just world. It is a narrative that respects the courage required to confront these realities, even as it acknowledges the deep imperfections and risks involved. In embracing this tale, readers should recognize that the characters and events, while grounded in recognizable truths, are shaped to explore these deeper themes of justice, power, and human endurance. The story serves as both a compelling drama and a profound reflection on the ongoing battle for accountability in our societies. Through Jasmine's eyes, we glimpse the courage it takes to stand firm when the world seems determined to break you, and the hope that even in the darkest moments, the fight for justice is never truly lost. This is a story about the unyielding spirit that refuses to be silenced, the pursuit of truth against all odds, and the belief that real change begins with those brave enough to demand it. From the shadows of betrayal and the echoes of silence emerges a call that cannot be ignored. Jasmine's fight was never just about exposing corruption. It was a battle for every silenced voice, every hidden truth buried beneath layers of power and deception. Now, as the dust begins to settle, the question remains. What will you do with this reckoning? The system that sought to crush her spirit still breathes, still fights back with veiled threats and whispered lies. But the injustice she faced, the relentless smear campaigns, the political assassinations of character, were not hers alone to bear. They are the scars of a broken institution, a testament to the cost of truth in a world ruled by silence. This is where you step in. This is where complacency must end. Look closely. See the cracks in the facade of untouchable power. Feel the weight of every hidden story that never saw the light of day. The fight for justice is not a spectator sport. It demands courage, resilience, and action. Jasmine's resolve is unwavering, but alone, even she cannot break the cycle of cover-ups and denial. It takes voices united. It takes hands joined across divides. It takes people who refuse to look away. This is your moment. The moment to rise against the tides of injustice that threaten to drown the truth. To stand with those who have been pushed to the margins, to amplify their stories, to demand accountability where silence once ruled. Every signature, every share, every word spoken in solidarity chips away at the fortress built by corruption. The fight continues, and you are part of it. In a world where power clings fiercely to its shadows, remember, true strength lies in transparency, in courage, in relentless pursuit of justice. Let Jasmine's story ignite a fire within you, not just to witness history but to shape it. Because silence is the enemy and action is the weapon. Will you pick it up? The road ahead is perilous. The forces arrayed against change are formidable and unforgiving. But as Jasmine stands tall against the storm, so too must you stand firm. This is not the end. It's the call to arms for everyone who believes justice is more than a word. It is a promise. The future demands it. The truth demands it. And so do the countless voices still waiting to be heard. Rise now. Speak now. Act now. The power to change everything is in your hands. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.